Ari Lewis Show.
All right, welcome everyone to today's episode of the Ari Lewis Show here on IsraelSportsAndNewsRadio.com. Thank you for joining us. If you'd like to email us throughout the program, you can do so at AriLewisShow@hotmail.com, or you can email the station at IsraelSportsAndNewsRadio@gmail.com. And if you'd like to make a financial contribution to the show, you can do so through my PayPal account. That is IsraelSportsRadio@yahoo.com. The PayPal is different than the station email, so I'll repeat it one more time, IsraelSportsRadio@yahoo.com. Now, last week we talked about a very terrible incident at the Western Wall, very violent incident we had on Rabbi Susan Silverman from Woman of the Wall. And as a response to that episode, a lot of people messaged me saying, why not interview the gentleman who was attacked? So we like to, of course, make our audience happy, give them the information that they deserve. So on the line right now, a person who could tell us exactly what happened, he was there, he was involved, Mr. Charlie Kalech. Sir, how you doing out there?
I'm doing better today. Every day's another step towards recovery.
Yes, and a first Lema to you, of course. Now, let's find out, because I've heard so many different versions of what happened, and you certainly know what did happen. This is Rosh Chodesh. You're at the Western Wall. You're at the Kotel. I've heard everything from the Torah was stolen, and then you passed it over, to things that you just simply passed it over, to you instigated something, to they attacked you. Give us your recollection of what happened on that day.
Okay. Well, first, you don't have to take my word for it. There certainly, in terms of how the Torah got to the women, it's very obvious in a video that's out there. But I'll tell you briefly what happened. There were two minyanim, two groups praying, one on the women's side of the mechitza, one on the men's side of the mechitza. I obviously was on the men's side. And we took out a Torah, as all the minyanim there do, on the men's side. And I had Galila, meaning that when the Torah finished being read, it was lifted, I rolled it up, and then I held it in a chair, sitting in a chair. And after we read it, then we danced a little bit with it. And there are two doors in the mechitza. Both these doors are unlocked. There's no sign. There's nothing. It's just doors in the mechitza. And at one point, one of the women opened a door and came to me. She walked into the men's side, maybe 2 steps, because I was sitting right there. And she took the Torah from me, went back on the other side, closed the door, and then they went on to read. That continued for about 10 to 20 minutes without any incidents. And it was actually very smooth, very quiet. And then some men started coming towards us. And they had this, kind of trot. Like they were looking for trouble, and they didn't look like they belonged. They were like big guys with, not necessarily dressed the most respectfully, like jeans and polo shirts. They weren't wearing any kind of uniform, and they started walking right towards us. And they walked through our minyan towards one of these doors, and I was in front of one of these doors, and the guy told me to move. And I said, "Who are you? Why should I move?" And they said, "We work here." And I said, "What do you do? What are you doing?" And they just said, "Move." So I said, "If you call the police and the police ask us to move, we'll move." At which point he moved me. This was a big guy. He basically pushed me straight back, and I fell straight back, hitting the back of my head on the stone floor. Then they went in to the women's side. Once they caused this ruckus, there was a handful of citizens that joined them, but the vast majority of the men praying continued to pray. We're talking about 10 or 15 people joined these guys. And basically, the police were on the women's side, and they told them to go back. There was some scuffle with other men, and another person got hurt, Alden Salove, and there was a man who, in Alden's description to the police, he said, this guy looked violent. He looked like he was going to get that Torah no matter what. And at that point, Alden was the only person between him and the women. So Alden wrapped his arms around him like a hug and just became dead weight and fell to the ground. What happened is the guy fell on top of him, so Alden lost control. The guy came up. Alden was worried about his tefillin and handed them to one of the women that was there for safekeeping, at which time the guy got up and stomped on Alden's stomach. So Alden now has a bruised kidney and a bruised liver and internal bleeding. Once the police sent these guys over, then the rest of the day was quiet. The women finished reading the Torah. The women danced with the Torah. And when they were ready to return the Torah, they returned it without incident through the door. When all of this was done, Alden and I went to the police to give a report and file a complaint about the people who had injured us. We have photographs. Therefore, it should be very easy for the police to identify these people. It was never confirmed that the man who injured me works for the Kotel. He never showed any kind of ID. No one ever claimed responsibility. When we went to Kishle, to the police station by Jaffa Gate to file the complaint, when we finished, they said Alden could go, but I had to stay. And I said, why do I need to stay? And they said, because you're a suspect. I said, what am I a suspect for? They said, for passing the Torah to women, which is forbidden. At that point, for the third time, I asked to see a doctor. They had already taken my phone, and when we originally got there, they didn't let a lawyer come in with us. At that point, they told me I could not see a doctor. They would not give back my phone, but they would call my lawyer for me. They tried to call the lawyer, couldn't get through, at which point the captain of the station came in and told me that they're releasing me for a few hours. I had to come back at 4 o'clock for interrogation, that I should go see my doctor and my lawyer.
Okay.
So that's what happened.
Okay, so, wow, so many things to question at that point.
Sure.
I guess, first of all, even though you don't know for sure, your heart of hearts, your hunch, your gut, do you believe the people that attacked you were just random people and they had nothing to do with the Kotel? What's your hunch on it?
No, I have reason to believe that the man who injured me works for the Western Wall Heritage Foundation, which is a government-sponsored nonprofit that, in other words, it's not privately funded. It's funded entirely by the government, and they're responsible for, let's call it, the sanctity of the site.
Okay, so that could set you up potentially for a lawsuit to the government because a government official injured you without cause, correct?
Yes. I mean, I can't say without cause, but what I can say is I've been told that these people are not policemen. The police were there.
Right.
And these people do not have the right, from my understanding, to use physical force, which they clearly did. I mean, anyone who's seen the pictures on Facebook or in the media sees this guy holding me while I'm holding my phone, taking a picture of him with one hand and the other hand's wrapped in tefillin. So I'm not touching him, and I couldn't even be touching him, whereas he has his hands around my neck.
Right. The picture is this very big gentleman with his hand on your neck. Now, the police then, very interesting, they tell you to come back. So did you come back? And then what were the interrogation questions like? And also, were you able to see a doctor in that small window of time where they let you go but said you had to come back?
Yeah, so I went to Terham right away and to the urgent care facility. I saw a doctor, and they basically said I had a head injury, that they prescribed some medication to help with the pain, and they said that it should get better in 2 to 3 days, and they gave me a whole list of symptoms to look out for. At the same time, Alden was examined by a doctor, and they determined that he had internal bleeding, and they did some more tests and determined that he had a bruised kidney and a bruised liver. Once we finished at the urgent care facility, I went back at 4 o'clock as I was ordered to, and I had to wait outside the station until 5:15 when they finally let me in. Again, I asked for my phone back, at which point the captain of the station said, well, I had talked to a lawyer. I actually had talked to 2 lawyers. And the lawyer said they had no right to take my phone. They can't do that without a court order, and they certainly don't have a right to go into my phone without my permission. So the first thing I did was I asked for my phone back and told them that I had talked to a lawyer, and the lawyer said, you have no right to take my phone. At which point the captain said, this isn't America.
Okay, but a lawyer you spoke to was a lawyer in Israel. It's not like you called up America, right? Or was this an American?
But okay. From my accent, and also, they asked me my place of birth. They know it's America, and it was a normal prejudice that Americans have a feeling that we have certain civil rights, and the police in Israel don't always respect those rights.
Okay, so that's a pretty weird line. He says this is not America. The thing is, I could believe that. That's something the Israeli police would say. So when he says that line to you, this isn't America, you say, congratulations, great, you figured out we're in Israel. Now can I have my phone back as according to the law? Or, what happens at the next point with your conversation?
No, so he said no, and he said, when we finish the interrogation, then we'll give it back to you.
Okay.
So
it's like you're in the second grade type of thing. That's what
it was a total power trip.
Yeah.
So at that point, I had a choice if I wanted to cooperate or not. And basically what I was told is if I didn't cooperate, they could keep me overnight in the Russian compound in jail. And that didn't really appeal to me. What my lawyer advised me is to cooperate, but really he said, you told them everything this morning when you filed your complaint. It's the same thing. So for about half an hour, I just repeated in different ways the officer who was the investigating officer. His name is Safi. So I would just say, Safi, listen, I told you everything this morning. I don't have anything to add. And that's what I said for half an hour. Before that, they told me, I asked them what the charges are, because it's not illegal to pass a Sefer Torah to a woman. So even though they said that initially, there were actually a team of lawyers and people who spent the afternoon looking and trying to figure out what could they possibly charge me with, and they couldn't come up with anything. So what did they charge me with? Disorderly contact, disorderly conduct and disturbing the public order, which is a catch-all. And as I described to you, I'm not the one who caused any disruption in public order. It was clearly these guys who came and went to the other side of the mechitza and caused problems. Once they finished their interrogation, I got mugshots, I got fingerprinted. Then they took my phone out of the room. They came back and they had printed pictures. I said, how did you get in without a code? And they said, we're the police.
But
So
but technically, how would they get in? They just know how to do that with the phone, I imagine.
I imagine. So
That
I
doesn't
also, by the
scare
way,
me. That doesn't scare me, right? Or anyone out there listening, I'm
by
sure.
the way, I mean, I have an iPhone, right? So with Find My iPhone, I could have erased it when I left. I could have gone to my computer and just erased the phone, but I didn't. So anyway, so once they printed out some pictures, they gave me the phone back. They told me I'm not allowed to go to the Kotel for 15 days, which later on I was told is the maximum they're allowed to do without a court hearing. And that was it.
Well, all right. So again, so many questions. Let's first. This is popping into my head. Now, if they said you committed some type of crime or that it was against the rules for this Torah to be passed, when the police came, why didn't they order the Torah to go back if it was such an important issue to them? I mean, they let the women continue reading from the Torah scroll. So what would be, not that you're a policeman, but what is your theory of why that happened?
Well, so this is actually very interesting, and this is exactly where we need this to go to a court, because we would really like a court to decide what's the law. My understanding is that on one hand you have the Sobel court case where Judge Sobel ruled that women can read Torah at the Kotel. On the other hand, the person who sets policy for the Kotel is Rabinovich, and he has said that you may not bring in a Torah from outside, and women may not use any of the 100 Torah scrolls which are in the possession of the Western Wall Heritage Foundation. So we have this absurd scenario where legally women are allowed to read Torah, but practically speaking, there's no way for them to get a Torah. So my understanding then is once the women had the Torah, the police were obligated to protect them because the courts have ruled they're allowed to read Torah. The question is, how can they get a Torah?
Okay.
By the way, Women of the Wall have offered to donate a Torah exclusively for women's use, and Rabinovich has said even if a Torah was donated for that purpose, he would not let women have a Torah.
Wow. All right. We're going to pause right here for a quick break. Again, this is the Ari Lewis Show here at Israel Sports and NewsRadio.com. Thank you for joining us. Our very special guest, Charlie Kalech, talking about what happened to him at the Kotel last week on Rosh Chodesh, the violent attack that was all over the news, and we're finally getting what really happened. We'll take a quick break and we'll be right back right after this.
DJ Venom, DJ Venom, DJ Venom, DJing parties throughout Israel, birthday parties, weddings, club events, bar mitzvahs, bat mitzvahs, and much more. You pick the type of music, and DJ Venom will turn your event into the party of the year. Available Sunday through Thursday. Call 052-952-6506 or email djvenom1984@yahoo.com. That's 052-952-6506 or email djvenom1984@yahoo.com. Book your party today. That's DJ Venom.
All right, so even though the Women of the Wall offered to give a free Torah scroll, that was going to be denied. Okay, so the court hearing, would that do anything? Because let's say it's established what exactly the law is. There's different opinions of the law. Is there a way that you could fight that where Women of the Torah add their own Torah scroll, and even though some people feel they shouldn't read it, some people say that it is okay, and is there a way that it could be read in that regard, if that makes any sense?
Well, so first you have to figure out what's the court hearing going to be, right? So my understanding is, first off, right now there are 3 open files. One is against me, one is against the guy who attacked me, and one is against the guy that attacked Alden. It's up to the police what they do. My understanding of Israeli law is it's different than American law. American law, you go to the police, and the police have to investigate and pursue this. In Israel, my understanding is the police don't. The police can decide that this is not valuable to the public or not of interest to the public or a waste of the public's resources and just drop the case. They also don't ever have to close the case or bring charges. It can just remain open and unresolved, which is, from what I've been told by lawyers, what happens in most cases. So the chances of any of this going any further, my guess, are pretty low. So then as a citizen or a group of citizens, there are several options. So first, Alden and or I can bring a criminal private case against the people who attacked us.
Right. And is that your plan? I mean, considering the amount of injuries you and he suffered, you figure you certainly have a case. So is that what you're going to plan on doing at this point?
Neither one of us have made that decision yet. We're both in the process of thinking about it and getting legal counsel.
Okay.
In addition to that, a lawyer has also told me that you can go after what's called a tzav aseh, which is like a proactive order. In other words, if anyone claims that I don't have the right to pass a Torah to a woman, I can go and petition a court to rule that I do have a right to do that. Now, the thing is that chances are that's not something that we would do because it's a very high-risk thing. It depends on the judge you get. No one has actually said that to me, right? No one has actually said I'm not allowed to do that. I mean, the policeman said it when he arrested me, but those aren't the charges. So my guess is when this happens again, and it will happen again, then there might be a more, a more definitive line of what's allowed and what's not allowed.
That's what I'm going to say. It sounds like there's so much unclarity of what is the law and what is not, and that could obviously add to a lot of confusion. So as far as, I want people to understand, if they're especially not listening to Israel, people might think, well, why doesn't Mr. Kalech just sue? Well, it's not so simple. There's lawyer fees, and there's not a guarantee that you're going to win, and there's also the fact that you kind of are on the radar of the government when you go after the government. Those are some of the thoughts you were thinking about?
Right, and not just the government. I mean, basically, potentially you're putting yourself at risk for all kinds of things. I mean, the board members of Women of the Wall have had their homes graffitied, have had threats to their life. We're dealing with religious fanatics. And unfortunately, as we've become all too aware in the last few years, religious fanatics are willing to go to quite extreme actions in order to protect what they believe in.
But is there also a fear from the police? Because since the police said things like, this isn't America, took your phone, that kind of stuff, is there any concern from their end about that, I should say?
I would say that would only be my concern if I was put in custody.
Fair enough. Again, this is the Ari Lewis Show here at IsraelSportsAndNewsRadio.com. You see that we are covering the story as it really happened. Now, it's kind of weird. I don't know the best analogy for this, but most people watch things that go on the media. Most people aren't a part of things that go on the media or not a part of the news. You were in this situation. What was it like for you personally to read different articles that wrote about what happened to you, and you kind of look at it and say, that's not true, or that is true? What was that like for you personally to be part of a news story?
Well, can I tell you, Ari, one thing that really has amazed me through this? Not one article that I have read has had all the facts correct. Not one.
Yeah, that doesn't really surprise me. But
it just kind of makes me wonder, all these other news stories we read where I'm not intimately involved and I don't know all the details. Like, there's so much misinformation out there.
I also want to know, did any of these news stories try to contact you the way, we contacted each other? I mean, to be
Right.
honest, you contacted me, but I was like, yes, let's do it. But did the other organizations even entertain the idea of interviewing you?
Oh, absolutely. I mean,
Okay.
I didn't get out of police custody until Monday night, right?
Okay.
I went there. It was probably around 10 in the morning. And other than the break that they gave me to see a doctor and lawyer, I didn't get out until Monday night. When I got out, I had 16 phone messages, about half of which were from media outlets. So I returned all of them the next day, and obviously some of the stories had already been published. To their credit, I have to say, the reporter from the Jerusalem Post got almost everything wrong, even though he interviewed two people that were there, and they didn't necessarily have all the information. And the next day, he interviewed Alden and I in a joint interview, and what he published was the most accurate thing that I have seen to date.
Okay, so it's good to know there. By the way, one thing I want to apologize for, I made a mistake last week in that I only thought it was you who was attacked and not Alden, but then Rabbi Silverman corrected me on that because the main picture you see is you being choked by this big gentleman. And you talked about Alden a bit because he suffered, it sounds like Alden suffered injuries maybe even more serious than you, and not you want to compare such things, but
Right.
What happened to Alden is pretty tough. You get stomped on, you have a damaged kidney. And he, it should be recognized what he had to go through as well.
Absolutely. I mean, one of the differences is that presumably I was attacked, again, this is unconfirmed, by someone who was a state employee, whereas Alden was attacked by a private citizen, although that was facilitated by state employees who opened up the gate in the division and allowed these citizens to come through. And basically, why were they coming through? They had no constructive motivation, and the police turned them back as well as will ensure they did.
It was one thing that was saved, that was taken care of. Again, Ari Lewis Show here is .com. We're speaking with Mr. Charlie Kalech, who suffered a violent attack last week at the Kotel in Rosh Chodesh. Particular plan for next Rosh Chodesh, because the day ban will be over by then. You can go. Do you want to go and risk what?
A while back, and bus load to the plaza and basically stuffed it so much. They're going to plan as a reaction to this for next month. But look, for over 25 years, Women of the Wall have been trying to have a prayer service, and they've been there every single month. Next month isn't going to be any different.
But how about as far as a plan of trying to read the Torah? What do you think will happen there?
I really don't know.
Because again, we still don't know what the rule is exactly. That's also part of the confusion. But this was the first time. Tell me if you know that if this was the first time Woman on the Wall read from a Torah, because that's what the understanding is. But was this the first time they attempted to read from a Torah, a long full Torah?
So no, this is the first time Women of the Wall read from a full-size Torah.
Right.
But a while back, they basically smuggled in a miniature Torah and read from a very small Torah.
Right.
What they've been doing most of the time is they're reading from a chumash, from a book, which, as opposed to a Torah scroll, which means, for instance, they can't say the blessings over the reading of the Torah.
Right.
And, it's not
the same. Yeah, that's for sure. It's definitely not the same.
By the way, I should point out that in many Orthodox synagogues, women have a Torah reading for women. And that's what we're talking about. We're not talking about an egalitarian service. We're not talking about men and women mixed. We're talking about a women's prayer group only for women, where women read the Torah for women. And this has been accepted by many Orthodox synagogues already.
Yeah, that's correct. I mean, my understanding within Halakha, if 10 women get together on their own, They can have a minyan prayer service. They can do pretty much whatever they like. So it is interesting why that would be against the rules at the Kotel. I don't know. Maybe it's because it's something public. I don't know exactly the terms and all that. Talk about again the physical injuries. You did see a doctor, and we were communicating a bit last week. So I understand you're physically feeling better now. But if you could explain to the audience, again, I know it's difficult because it's such a personal thing, but kind of where you were last week, where you are now, and some of the progress you've made, and some of the expectations your doctors have told you where you will be healing in the next few days, hopefully.
All right. Well, I got a severe blow to the head, the result of which was a week of headaches. Today is exactly a week later, and it's the first day I don't have a headache. I had a headache consistently, no stop, for the last week. I also had dizziness and nausea. The dizziness and nausea is still there a little bit. It was so bad that there were a couple of nights where I woke up in the middle of the night, both from the pain and from the dizziness and nausea. I've not only seen a doctor, I've also gotten a second opinion. I also did some healing work, taking some homeopathic remedies. So basically my attitude is do whatever you can to help you feel better. And the doctors have told me, initially they said that this could go on for 2 to 3 days. As I've said, it went on for 7 days so far. And yesterday when I talked to my family physician, he said that it could even go on for a month.
Wow. Okay, but you said though you were not feeling the headache today, so that is a good sign. And I guess
well, I would say I'm not feeling a headache as I was. Now it's a much milder headache, and it comes and goes. It's the first time I haven't had a steady, strong headache.
Okay, but that sounds like the right direction at least. That it's an improvement.
Hopefully.
Yeah, right. But it's for sure about that. So let's, I think a lot of people, I spoke to, for example, Rabbi Yehuda Glick, who suffered 4 shots point blank range after giving a speech, and I asked him, to do it over, would you do it? And he said, yeah, he believed that when he was doing the right thing, he didn't want to be scared off by terrorism. In this case, people are trying to be scared off by someone else. So, I'll ask you a similar question. Do it over, would you have slept in, missed minyan, not gone to the Kotel, and not had to deal with what you had to deal with the past week and a half?
I would absolutely do it again. Look, Ari, we are so blessed. We are so fortunate. We are living in this wonderful time when our people have come back to our homeland, and what Jews have prayed for 2,000 years, we get to live. And I don't want to be a spectator. I want to play the game. And right now, we're at this turning point where we're determining what kind of state this is going to be. It's very clear to me, and people say it with no shame. There are Facebook messages that I've received that basically say, look, halakha, Jewish law, has one way, it's the right way, and it is more important than democracy, and it is more important than the laws of the State of Israel. People have said that to me. I don't feel that way. I think that, all you have to do is open a Daf Talmud to see multiple opinions. That's the way Judaism has always been. And for people to hijack it for their own purposes and their own desire to maintain their power base is not just a betrayal of the Jewish people and the state, but to me, it's a betrayal of the spirit of Judaism that goes back 2,000 years. So to me, this is a much bigger issue. This has to do with the protection of people who don't have power. And like any struggle, it requires the people who do have power to get involved in order to affect change. In the States, the civil rights movement only gathered momentum when the whites started getting involved. It's questionable if it was only the blacks if it ever would have succeeded. So here too, it's not enough for a group of women to be involved, whether it's at the Kotel or on the buses that are separate despite the law, whether it's a girl walking to school in Beit Shemesh, it's all the same issue.
And the issue would be religious fundamentalism, you believe?
It's that there is a small fringe minority that has power, and they are trying to impose that on the rest of the population. And unfortunately, in just the last few years, especially when it comes to gender segregation, we've seen it explode. It was never like this. Look, Ari, for years, there were mixed groups in the plaza of the Kotel. That's how I grew up. I grew up coming to Israel. My background is in the conservative movement, and I came with Ramah, and I came with USY, and we davened at the Kotel in a mixed group with a Torah, and no one said anything. And I can tell you that that happened in my personal experience from 1983 to 1997.
So you believe it's more of a last, I guess, almost 20 years, 18 years, that there's been more of a change in thought?
Well, it's not necessarily a change in thought. It's a change in policy.
Wow, very interesting stuff. And I guess it's good to hear that you're feeling better. Hopefully you continue to feel better. And then it's nice to also hear, I'm very impressed that you said to do it over, you wouldn't have changed a thing, because that's not easy to say considering everything that happened. Whatever you decide to do in regards to continuing with a potential lawsuit, which certainly you have grounds for, but either if that does happen or doesn't happen, either way, the plan is to go to the Kotel in about 3 weeks from now.
Absolutely.
Okay. All right, great. Well, we certainly appreciate the time. My guest this afternoon, Charlie Kalech, who was assaulted last week. Everyone has seen all the pictures in the news. Very horrific stuff, but it was very my honor, if you will, to have Mr. Kalech on and tell us side of the story. Thank you for your time. Continue to feel better, and Godspeed. I hope everything just gets better for you.
Thank you very, very much, Ari.